We are live. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here on this Tuesday. And if you have questions for myself or for Cindy, please, whatever platform you're on, drop them in. But today we have a special guest. And let me tell you a little bit about Cindy Goldrich. She is a mental health counselor, ADHD, and executive functioning parenting specialist, which you know how important executive functioning is. So I'm so excited to have somebody who's a true expert. And she just wrote a book. It's the second edition, 8 Keys to Parenting Kids and Teens with ADHD. And she guides families that build skills to help kids become independent. Because for all of us that are either neurodivergent ourselves, or we are parenting neurodivergent kids or kids with mental health issues, we worry about our kids' independence. And that is why executive functioning is so critical. And executive functioning, a pill is not going to fix that. Skills is what happens. So we are going to dive in and please, if you're here and you're listening, I can't tell you how important it is to buy an author's book. You can head over to PTS coaching.com, all your platforms. Please buy a book. And if you have a 5-star review, leave a review because that is so important. And just so everybody knows, because you're going to hear me talk about my book 24/7. So, is that when you leave a review, when you buy this book, the platforms push it out more. And that means we're helping more people. So if you're so inclined, this isn't outside of your budget, you're a professional, you're a parent, you're a caregiver, buy the book. It's a great book. I bought it myself, but I already owned the first book. So, and I left a review because we have to. So welcome, Cindy. How
Thank
are you
you. Thank you.
today?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm really excited to sit and talk with you. We've been kind of going back and forth about doing this, so I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here. So let's jump in. So parents often think ADHD is just inattention or hyperactivity, but what are we really missing about kids with ADHD that you wish every parent and maybe it's the same thing for teachers. What do you wish they knew that you could preach from the rooftops?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned teachers. I'll say something about that after I answer your question directly. So it's interesting. When I start out, any public talk, I say, okay, when we think about ADHD, forgetting the diagnosis, what growing up who were these kids, right? They were the ones that we said were lazy and unmotivated and annoying and difficult, or the space cadet just twirling their hair, right? We had lots of names for these kids. In reality, what we really understand is, yes, this is a neurodiverse condition. But what's interesting, and as you mentioned, this is the second edition of the book. The first book I wrote in 2013, so it's over 10 years ago, right? And so people say, like, what has changed? Our understanding has just really crystallized a lot around the fact that ADHD is a disorder of the executive function system. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit. ADHD lives in the front part of the brain, right? The brain develops from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. The back of the brain, just real simply, is where your emotions are, right? The amygdala, the reptilian part of the brain, and the brain develops from the back to the front, where the prefrontal cortex is. The prefrontal cortex is where we see ADHD, but it's also where we see executive function. And so we now know that by definition, if someone has ADHD, they're going to have deficits in their executive function system. But be careful, because the opposite is not true. Just because someone has challenges in their executive function system does not mean that they have ADHD. Right? So even knowing this alone is such an important thing for parents to understand, because while they're thinking about, oh, my kid can't focus, and oh, they need to really understand what is the full range of the impact. And that's when we start really looking into executive function. And the reason I'm happy that you mentioned teachers is one of the mistakes parents make, and it's heartbreaking, is that they assume that their teachers are experts in understanding all of this. experts in executive function. I'm here to tell you that they are not. They would like to be,
Amen.
right? But
And
I
they
will
want
tell
it.
you, huh?
They want it, just like you said.
They absolutely do. In fact, my second book that I wrote, which I guess is behind here, I'll just show you. It's ADHD, Executive Function, Behavioral Challenges in the Classroom, was co-written by my daughter, who's been a special ed teacher for 10 years. And so we talk about this stuff all the time. Teachers desperately do want to have this knowledge. Parents, if you're out there, let them know. I've got trainings for teachers. There are trainings for teachers, but you sometimes have to get the school on board, which is what's challenging. It's not that the teachers don't want to know this stuff. They do, but
And let's face it, Cindy, I used to be a school psychologist in the,
right.
many few decades ago. And I'm really grateful for that time. I loved being in a school. I'm still a certified school psychologist. Shout out to all my school peeps. But there's so many budget cuts,
Yeah,
right? And what's happened in this time that you and I have been practicing is there's just this rise of ADHD. And people sometimes get angry at me because, you know, I say not every case is ADHD. And I can back it up because I've done over
hmm
10,000 brain maps. I can actually see in the brain, and we know exactly what an ADHD brain looks like.
right.
What's happening is kids are struggling with focus. And you said something so important. So every single person with ADHD has executive functioning issues, but
hmm
not everybody with executive functioning issues has ADHD. Let's
That's right.
unpack that a little bit
Sure, sure.
because this is one of the greatest conversations I have with all of my parents or people coming into me. So, there are a multitude of things that affect your executive functioning, including anxiety, OCD, mood disorder,
hmm
uh, dyslexia and learning disabilities, nutrient
Trauma.
deficiency, trauma. So when the way your biology works is exactly what you said. When the autonomic nervous system activates and you are dysregulating, and dysregulation isn't just overactivation, it's
hmm
underactivation.
Right.
Would unpack that in my book and really help to make it simple. But you're here and you're listening and you're following. I talk about it all the time. So that nervous system has one path: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that means executive functioning goes offline. So
hmm
when we, God forbid, you have OCD, anxiety, even mood disorder, and you get put on a stimulant, you could have a psychotic break, a worsening of symptoms, other problems. That is not always the path. I'm not saying it's that direct, but you're just getting an incredible amount of people who are
Yeah.
misdiagnosed as ADHD. Please know those symptoms need to show up early. Doesn't mean you're seeing the exact same symptoms, but
hmm
you're going to look back, right? And you're going to see, oh, maybe they had a hard time sitting in kindergarten. But you still have to rule out the other things
That's
from a
right.
clinician perspective. I don't see people ruling stuff out. They're just like, here's the ADD meds, and the providers, the teachers who are the frontline workers, you're so astute to talk about that parents assume that teachers understand what executive
Right.
functioning is because you and I get contacted all the time by school professionals like, why aren't we teaching this? So, what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions we see about ADHD kids?
I would say one of the biggest things is that it's willful behavior, because what happens is parents see them do something right, and then they assume, well, if they did it right, why can't they do it again? He packed up his backpack yesterday. If he didn't do it today, it's because he doesn't want to. He's lazy, he's unmotivated, or something else. The reality is, all the stars weren't aligned. When you think about all of the executive functions, right, that have to be going on, and of course, the interplay of anxiety or depression or any of the other things, today is not the same as yesterday. And so we have to really help them build the skills and the awareness, and not, one of the examples I always give when I'm teaching about executive functions is, if you say to your kid, hey, do me a favor, go upstairs, get your backpack, your shoes, your tennis racket. On the way downstairs, grab my water bottle and see if I shut my light off. What's the emotion you think many of the parents are feeling right now? Not the kid, but the parent when their kid maybe, doesn't come down with everything. What's the emotion?
Oh, of course, they're overwhelmed, they're frustrated, they're annoyed, they're sad. Like, it could
All
be
of that.
all of those things all at once.
Right. But what if we now help the parent understand, you know what? Working memory is actually a skill. There's short-term memory, I need juice, eggs, and milk. There's long-term memory, your childhood phone number, right? Knowing how to do a long division problem in your brain is working memory though, right? That manipulating of information, right? That holding on to, okay, I'm getting this and this, and oh, when I looked in my room, I got distracted because I saw this. I remembered I have to call my friend. Oh, the tennis racket. Oh yeah, but did mom make a tennis lesson for, right? So all that stuff going on. So the kid may come down with, if they even come down with one or two things, and the mother gets frustrated, the father gets frustrated. Understandably, parents are human, right? We have to give them grace. But the reality is, the kid may just not have been able to hold on to all of that information and may have gotten distracted, et cetera, et cetera. So then, if I know that my kid has a weaker working memory, then I can go into problem solving mode. Oh, maybe I should write down the list I need for him. Maybe I should tell him one or two things and then check in with him. Whatever it is, that's the easy part. So the mistake parents make is judging behavior, right?
As
What they see
willfulness.
as
Yeah.
willfulness.
Yeah. And I think I mean, the parents that are here are starting to get that, right? And also, Cindy, working memory is affected by emotional dysregulation.
Of
So
course.
all your systems are going to go offline. But I love that you're talking about, I'm always, skills, not pills, because parents, they get this. They're like, what am I not doing? Because that isn't working. Yes, maybe you have ADHD and the meds are helping you. God bless. That's great, right? I don't
Hmm.
want it to be the first line of defense, but the skills still have to be taught. And that's
Yes.
what you're talking about. So you have been talking about executive functioning for a long time. This is what you do every day. You
Hmm.
do it every day. And I'm always talking about starting with the end in mind and working backwards
Hmm.
and really tapping into the visual kinesthetic centers because our neurodivergent learners are almost exclusively kinesthetic visual learners. It's rare that they're auditory. Give parents, like, in your book, um and the 8 keys to parenting, let's unpack one area that really you or they could walk away with today and help their kids. And this isn't just about ADHD. This is about anybody where their executive functioning is down. And now you're broadening it, right? We had somebody who made a comment that said, he has cerebral palsy, and he was diagnosed with ADHD. But is it really ADHD, or is it affecting? Is it from that cerebral palsy? And this is why we do this, so we can start thinking differently. But let's talk about one area to really help parents build some skills, because as you talked about in real life, they're getting into power struggles. Maybe some kids are over functioning, some kids are under functioning, and our over functioners, it wears out their system. It can create anxiety and mood problems and all that. But let's dive into a real world strategy that, for people that are listening, but also that's in your book that they
Hmm.
can dive more into.
Yeah. Is there an area you want me to pinpoint or you want me
No,
to?
I just how about something that is like darn, every parent, those conversations that you're constantly having and you wish this is a really useful tactical skill that somebody could walk away with today.
Hmm. Well, I would say working off of the working memory, because that
Yeah,
creates some of the greatest challenges for kids, right? One of the things you can do is when you see what your child needs to do, right? Let's say it's even a homework assignment. Let's say it's a reading assignment, okay? You may want to help them think, okay, what are you holding on in your head that's creating too much stuff, too much luggage in your head? What can we offload? How can we do that? So something as simple as, I'll give you a simple technique. Adults use this too. let's say I'm going to read a book. You ever start reading a novel and you get to chapter 3 and they talk about Charlie and you're like, wait, who's Charlie? I remember they mentioned Charlie at the beginning. I don't remember who Charlie is and why he's important. So you start flipping back into the beginning of the book, right? Here's a simple thing to do. Take a piece of paper every time you're going to read a novel and just write 3 lines, right? The page number that the character or the event is introduced, the character or the event, and then in your own words, why is this important, right? So that way I will have written on page 5, Charlie, he's the one that's Sam's best friend and they went to camp together. I don't know, whatever it is, right? But I now know what page number it is. So when I get there, but why is this valuable? It's valuable because first of all, it's going to solve that problem, the immediate problem, but it's also already giving the kids the idea that, oh, I can have a technique. What can I do if my working memory isn't strong enough for the moment to help me deal with it? What can I do if the teacher's writing all this stuff on the board, right? And I'm going to have to then go home and do homework on it. What are the important pieces that I need to write down? Maybe I'm going to need to talk to the teacher. Hey, can I take a picture of it? Or could you take a picture of the board? Whatever it is. So I start to anticipate where I'm going to need this support.
Yeah. And, let's talk about strategies in general and even backing up further. So we know our neurodivergent kids are often brighter than normal and they tend to have a high average IQ. And
Right.
so the mistake parents make is thinking high IQ, skills and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
executive functioning is a learned skill. Just like you're not born regulated, these are
Right.
skills you learn over time. So
Mm-hmm.
let me say this again. These are skills that you are not born with and you develop, and they
Mm-hmm.
actually are independent of intelligence.
Right.
Some of the brightest kids I know
And the
struggle to remember to flush the toilet.
That's right.
That's
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 right.
the number one complaint I get is the toilet and then it's homework. And then they get so freaked out they're living in their basement. They're not gonna live in the basement if you teach independent skills. They're gonna live in your basement if you don't focus on the independent skills. Like, I'm not messing around. This is the way it is, people.
Mm-hmm.
So but when we talk about these skills, I think what people don't realize, so I have great executive functioning skills. Like me and one of my kids, my youngest, who's a triple deficit dyslexic, has incredible executive functioning skills. Where teachers rely on him in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom and have since preschool, okay, to remember. He was an absorber. He's quiet. If you can imagine, I have a quiet, shy kid. But he learned by watching me teach his brother, who didn't
Mm-hmm.
have executive functioning skills. What's the point I'm trying to make here? We have to make the implicit explicit.
Yeah.
And just because, right? Because kids, right? And these skills are so important. And it's not just teaching the skills, it's actually helping your kids who probably have a lot of shame because, especially your brighter kids, they hate that something is hard for them. Your average IQ kid is like, "I got it. I'm working at it," right? But your high IQ kids are so freaking irritated that
Right.
something isn't like that for them. So, we have to educate them. We have to normalize it. I like to put a lot of humor around it and say like, "Hey, my kid came from a Montessori school to a Catholic school. Do you know how many tests he had to take?" He was like, he's got a great attitude, but I was like, "JC, you're gonna be, like, bombarded with tests every day," and he was like, "Oh my god." And the first week of school, he was like, "Fun time is over." And I was like, "Fun time's over." But it's not, you're gonna learn it. And so I share these stories because I want parents to understand this. You have the power, and when you use tools like Cindy's book, and you start really having proper guidance from a professional, not some influencer who has no training and is just using AI. I'm like, come on. We've tested this. We know what works
Yeah.
in the real world, and you have the ability to do this. You just need guidance from a professional who's used these things in the past. And I just can't say this enough. Do not give up your power to a pill because this is not going to help your kid. You need the skills. And it's never too late to learn this because the other part of this is that many parents um, are neurodivergent themselves and they feel like they're choking on the executive function. You can do this together and you can just do it in little bits, right? You're not going to learn everything overnight. You just focus on one skill and build for that. But the explicit teaching of skills, talk about that. And, where should parents start when they're listening, they're watching? Where should they start with skills? What's the first skill that's the most base part for you?
Right. I actually back up when I do
Okay.
this with parents, and I really start by giving them a full deep dive into the social and emotional impact that ADHD and executive function challenges have on learning and motivation and behavior and the whole family system. So even adults who read my book are benefiting because what they're doing is they're really learning about this foundation. When I do this, I have a workshop series called Calm and Connected: Parenting Kids and Teens with ADHD. It's a 7-session workshop series, right? But session 1, which is about 2 hours, we are spending a lot of time really understanding. I mean, I just explained this much about working memory. We go into much more detail. So to your point, like, what's the first skill you start with? The first skill I start with is educating the parent. That is the most important thing. And, when you talk about medication, right? You're right. Pills don't teach skills. Who teaches skills? Parents and educators and life, right? I look at pills as putting on an internal pair of glasses. I could take these glasses off and squint as hard as I can, but I'm not going to be able to read. I need these to be able to read. But putting them on doesn't mean I now can read every language. I have to learn how to read the different languages,
You do. You do. And I'm
right?
glad you brought up that this book, because somebody has a question if this book is for young adults. And the answer is yes. And
Absolutely, yeah.
and for adults, because I don't want you to think that you can never achieve these things because we know when you don't have executive functioning, somebody brought up struggles with grocery shopping. Thank you for sharing that. That is a real pain point where you go to
Mhm,
the grocery store and you're like, why am I here? And then you get things that can't even make a recipe, and then you go home and your partner's annoyed at you. And one of the moms is saying, I'm a parent who also has ADHD and keeping routines is really hard. And she forgets everything. Any
mhm.
advice for that parent? Because guess what? You got to put your own oxygen mask on,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And I know you dive into this in your course and in your
absolutely.
book, but for me, I want to tell you to regulate your nervous system first because you're not going to learn anything if your nervous system isn't regulating. And when you have a kid, I have a kid with executive functioning challenges. I know when he's gonna approach me because he's a no kid. He says no to everything first, that I have to have my stuff together.
Well, so here's what I
Otherwise, negative interaction. So I'd love to hear from you, Cindy. Where do people start?
yeah. So here's what I would say about that. I do think that being calm, regulating is essential. However, what I've shifted in the last few years, because, look, I've been doing this a long time and I've
Yeah.
seen all the trends we talk about, mindfulness and meditation and all of that, which is so important, right? It's so grounding and everything. But the reality is that without knowledge, that calm is only temporary, because you could be as calm as you want, and then when your kid blows
Still got to
up,
have the
you still
skills.
have to have your tools.
Yeah.
So that comes from confidence, and confidence comes from knowledge, right?
And practice,
So,
right?
and practice, absolutely. So
Being
that's where,
successful in a micro way.
right. But here's the other thing I will say. When people say, well, could you just give me a few tips? Can you just give me a few skills? Again, I've got all the skills in the world. I promise you. I can give you skills till the cows come home. But here's the thing. My philosophy is parent the child you have, not the child you thought you'd have, not the child you wish you'd have, not the child you'd have if your mother-in-law or society got its way. And you have more than one child. I have more than one child. They're not the same. right? Each child is different. So that's where that knowledge of your specific child is so important. Because if a parent comes to you and says, I can't get my kid out the door in the morning, what are some tools? If I start listing a bunch of influencer, like really good tools, that may not land because I don't know why the kid's having a hard time getting out the door. And that's where I need to start. I need to
Yeah.
really connect with this parent and help them figure out what's going on. Is it something like they're not getting enough sleep? And so waking up in the morning is really hard? Do they have trouble picking out what they're wearing in the morning? Are they so hungry that they can't function until they eat a little bit? Are they, I can come up with a
Yeah.
million and one scenarios, right? I can't go problem solving until I have more from you, which leads me to another one of my, the book is 8 keys, right? One of the main keys is about communication. I need to be able to, well, one of the keys is about connection. That's why all the keys, when
Yeah.
you read the book, you'll see it makes sense. I literally am building a new house, right? And the foundation is calm, and the center is connection, that relationship. But the two main walls are communication, how we communicate, how we really listen, how we help them talk, and then collaboration, how we
Yeah.
really can work together, because that whole top-down parenting approach doesn't work. But I will also say this
Yeah.
whole gentle parenting where, we're letting the
It
kid,
doesn't work either.
that's not either. We
No.
need strategies. We need a system. We need a structure. But within that, we need a relationship.
Well, and those things can really only happen when the nervous system is regulated enough. I talk about being in the red, you cannot connect, you cannot correct, you can't
Yeah.
teach. The nervous system will not allow you. Yellow is when you're co regulating, it starts opening the door. This is not perfect parenting. You have to create capacity in
Hmm.
your child's nervous system. It's a window of tolerance because what's happening is everybody's stress cup is so full that
Right.
nothing is sticking. And that is why we have an epidemic of diagnoses. I'm not saying these aren't real. What I'm saying is we have a nervous system dysregulation component. And I want everybody to know in my book, which comes out in September, I'm going to anoint you to be a dysregulation detective. And I'm going to give you the entire mapping, how to do it yourself. It does not mean you're not working with somebody else because you still need proper tools. But the biggest lesson here is that these tools are needed and you have the power to communicate with your child. You have the power to help your child's attention and executive functioning and all these things get better. You just have to do it the right way. So
Hmm.
one of my moms, Carrie, she's asking which book to start with. You're going to start with 8 Keys to Parenting Kids and Teens with ADHD, and you go to ptscoaching.com. This is where you're
Yeah.
going to start. And Carrie, buy it and leave a review. You're a good lady.
And
I
I
know you.
and I will add on, when she said which book, in case she was thinking that book or the other one that I mentioned, the classroom
Yeah.
book. The classroom book is a great book to give to your teachers because it's got tons of PDFs, handouts, and everything else for the teachers to be able to use right away.
And
And
don't
it's a
think your teacher
subtle,
has it.
right, and it's a subtle way of helping the teacher get some more information, because you may bring it to the teacher and say, "Hey, I found this form on page 34 that will really help." And the teacher's going to look through and say, "Oh, I can learn more about all this other stuff." So
Yeah,
it's been very effective.
absolutely. And, I am a fan of AI in the time of AI. AI doesn't have the practical experience. It's only regurgitating information. And what's going into AI is a lot of people who are full of baloney and cheese. I'll
Hmm.
use some other words in there. But for sure. So this is such a great conversation. I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire short questions, okay? Because I want to tap into your vast knowledge. ADHD is not about,
Laziness, unmotivated, mood.
I love it. The most damaging myth about ADHD is, we touched on it, but
That it's in their control.
yeah,
That if they just
totally.
tried harder, if they just cared more.
They just were disciplined differently.
Yeah.
I hear that one all the time. And if you could ban one parenting strategy for ADHD, what would it be?
Sticker charts.
So true, right? In the classroom, yeah, I would ban I'm gonna tell you just my own PTSD from it, when 1 year we were in 2 years we were in public school. I'm not bashing public school 'cause the first year was amazing. Miss Sullivan, kindergarten, um, is when you're doing punitive points.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
they did a red
that's in
terrible.
that same
So
category.
demoralizing and scarring for
Yeah.
children. Like,
And I
if
talk
you're
about that a lot in the book because I talk about the impact of rewards and imposed consequences and why these actually can backfire. Not
Yeah.
even just not work, but they can backfire on you. So,
And really cause a lifetime of emotional
yeah,
scars.
yeah.
Remember this, parents, your words matter, and teachers. You can choose to use empowering words or not. You choose to carry the same crap your parents maybe because they thought negative comments were gonna help you, we know better. And this does not mean you don't discipline your children. It means
Mm-hmm.
that we're showing kids what we want to see, okay? And guiding them. And that's a big part of executive functioning is just making that implicit explicit in a positive way, but you're actually guiding them to the path because they don't know. They don't know. Yeah. Oh, somebody's asking then why some behavioral therapy is based on rewards. I'm not opposed to all rewards, right? We do rewards all the time for things they're already earning. Like kids don't get unlimited screen time when they work for me. Those are things they work towards. Like we all get
Mm-hmm.
a paycheck, but these sticker chart things explain further on why you feel it can be very punitive for kids.
Look at it this way. It depends on what we're incentivizing. If we're incentivizing something that is within the kid's wheelhouse, they're response able, and they just need to build that muscle memory, then I think it can help, like hanging up the towel in the bathroom. If we're incentivizing get your homework done, that's way too complex. And it's not all in that kid's control every moment of that process. So if they can't, they turn it on themselves. They can start to feel shame. They turn it on you because how could you dangle this thing in front of me that I can't do? You know, they feel like, well, you just don't understand me. You think you think I want to sit here for hours and struggle over my homework. You think I don't know that I'm missing going out and playing with my friends because I'm not getting it done. So that creates a disconnection with the parent, and that's a little bit of an understanding of why
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of these things. And I agree with you. There are times where here's how I look at it. If you're trying, and just like you can do it for yourself too, if you're trying to build muscle memory, if you're trying to get into a habit, right? And it's all in your control and you know how to do it, fine, set up a reward system. I brushed my teeth every night. I checked it off every night. So you know what? I'm going and buying myself that shirt I've been looking at for a month,
But
right?
but
Because
homework
every day I remember to do that. But something
yeah.
more complex like that,
Yeah, and
no.
that's making an assumption that they know what to do, which is one of the biggest things that is a breakdown, right?
Yeah.
Is that again, we assume somebody's smart and maybe they're doing well in school technically because we don't know how much they're scaffolding. And then we are saying, here's a mountain, get your homework in, but we're not really getting what's underneath it. What are the skills? And that, parents have more of capability there than they realize even when you have executive functioning
Mm-hmm.
challenges. And that's why understanding how the brains works and the steps you need to take. But this has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad you're
Thank
here.
you.
Please get this book. Like I said, I already had owned the first one probably 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that it was updated for the changes and really making sure parents because we are moving to a more inattentive society and we need more of these skills to be
Mm-hmm.
explicitly taught. And I'm so grateful that you're guiding people towards this. But thank you so much, Cindy, and
Thank
for all of
you.
you that joined us. Please, if you have
And
more
if I could,
questions, drop it in the chat.
and I'll just say that if they want, I can send the introductory chapter of the book and some really good parenting strategies just either email me, Cindy@ptscoaching.com, and mention how you heard about
Okay.
me and
And
this
it's on your
work.
website. Her email's on her
And
website.
exactly, and on the
Yeah.
website,
Well,
and
that's
just
awfully
but
generous of you.
yeah, yeah, I will
By
send that
by the
out.
book,
So just
moms and dads and teachers.
mention where you heard this so that I
Yeah.
know to send it to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And thank you, all the parents and professionals that are here and doing things differently because you changed the trajectory of your child's life. Bye,
You
everybody.
too.